What if Europeans had not colonized the Americas? Imagine October 12, 1492. Christopher Columbus's 3 ships are sailing toward an unknown shore, but a sudden storm forces them to turn back. The crew is exhausted, there is almost no food left, and Columbus decides to head home. He returns to Spain empty-handed, his reputation ruined, and the Spanish king loses interest in expensive voyages across the ocean. Portugal, England, and France look at this failure and think, the ocean is too big, the risk is too high, why spend the money? Over the next centuries, a few ships still try to reach the western lands, but no one establishes permanent settlements there. The Americas remain cut off from Europe for hundreds more years. This is our thought experiment. What would have happened to the world if Europeans had not colonized the Americas? What would 2025 look like without the United States? Let's start with 1491. In the two Americas, there lived between 50 and 100 million people, about as many in Europe. Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztecs, had about 200,000 inhabitants, more than London or Rome at the time. The city stood on an island in the middle of a lake, connected to the shore by causeways, with special channels for clean water from the mountains and floating gardens on the water for growing food. The Aztec Empire controlled a vast territory with developed trade and a taxation system. In the south, the Inca Empire stretched from Ecuador to Chile, governing 12 million people through the longest road system in the Americas, over 40,000 kilometers of roads between the mountains and the coast. The Incas had their own system of recording information, using knots on cords, built impressive structures such as Machu Picchu, and had a state distribution system for goods. Without European colonization, the greatest catastrophe in the history of the Americas would not have happened. When the Spanish arrived, they brought not only weapons, but also diseases. Smallpox, measles, and influenza killed between 90 and 95% of the indigenous population over 100 years. This is the greatest die-off of people in history. In our scenario, these 50 to 100 million people continue to live, have children, and build their states. By 2025, the population of the Americas could naturally have grown to 500 to 800 million with their own technologies, medicine, and agriculture. How would these civilizations have developed on their own? The Aztec Empire was on the verge of a breakthrough. They already had sophisticated mathematics with zero, developed astronomy with accurate calendars, and understood planetary cycles. Their physicians performed surgeries, used herbs for treatment, and even treated teeth. Without the Spanish invasion, the Aztecs could have continued developing. By the 17th to 18th centuries, they might have invented the wheel for carts. They knew about the wheel, made toys with it, but did not have horses or oxen to pull loads. If they had obtained llamas from the south, this could have changed. They worked with copper, gold, and silver. By the 1700s, they could have mastered bronze and then iron, as happened in Europe and Asia. The Inca Empire had its own advantages. They practiced terraced agriculture on mountain slopes, cutting horizontal steps and growing crops on each. This prevented rain from washing away the soil and allowed the use of every piece of land. They had the mita system, where each person worked for the state for a certain time free of charge. Thanks to this, the Incas built roads, bridges, and warehouses throughout the empire. Their suspension bridges made of plant fibers could span 50 meters over gorges. Without the Spanish, the Incas would have continued expanding the empire north and south. By the 19th century, the Inca state could have had over 50 million people with an army, officials, and schools. In the north, in the territory of modern-day USA and Canada, development was slower. The Mississippian culture, centered on the city of Cahokia, began to weaken even before the arrival of Europeans due to environmental problems and climate changes. But without mass die-offs, indigenous people would have continued their experiments. The Iroquois Confederacy had existed since the 15th century. It was a union of 6 nations with democratic decision-making, separation of powers, and even women's right to vote in some matters. Without European pressure, this confederacy could have expanded from the Great Lakes to the Appalachians. By the 1800s, a state could have emerged here with 5 to 10 million people, growing corn, beans, squash, and trading from the Atlantic to the Central Plains. On the Great Plains, nomadic peoples hunted bison, huge wild cattle. Before Europeans, there were between 30 and 60 million of these animals. Indigenous people hunted moderately, killing only as much as needed for food, clothing, and shelter. The herds regenerated naturally. But when Europeans arrived in the 19th century, they began to kill bison in mass, sometimes just for fun, shooting from train windows. Within a few decades, fewer than 1,000 animals remained out of 60 million. In our scenario, these 60 million bison would have continued to exist. This would have been the largest population of wild large animals on the planet. Nomadic peoples could have created alliances for joint control of territory territories, trade, and defense. Would the Americas have remained isolated forever? Hardly. By the 18th to 19th centuries, seafaring technologies would have improved enough that contact would have become inevitable. But it would have been a completely different contact. Instead of conquering peoples weakened by disease, Europeans would have encountered strong states with tens of millions of people. Imagine a British ship in 1750 finding not scattered tribes, but the Aztec Empire with an army of hundreds of thousands, cities the size of European ones, and diplomats ready for negotiations. Trade would have begun instead of war. The Americas had what Europe did not: maize, potatoes, tomatoes, cacao, rubber, tobacco. Europe had what the Americas did not: horses, cows, wheat, rice, metalworking technologies, gunpowder. Exchange would have begun to change both continents. Potatoes and corn would have changed European agriculture. Horses would have radically changed American societies. Nomadic peoples would have gained mobility many times greater. The armies of the Aztecs and Incas on horseback would have become very dangerous. By 1850, mixed technologies would have appeared. American states would have used European metallurgy and firearms while retaining their independence. In the 19th century, the Americas would have entered the industrial era in their own way. The Aztecs and Incas had access to enormous silver deposits in Mexico and Bolivia, the same ones that enriched Spain in reality. But now, this wealth would have remained in the Americas and gone into developing their own industry, railways, and education. The first American universities would have appeared in Tenochtitlan or Cusco. By 1900, there would have been two large American states on the world map: the Mexican Empire, with 40 to 50 million people, and the Andean Empire, with 30 to 40 million. In the north, in the territory of modern USA, everything would have been more complicated. There would have been 10 to 20 million people here by the 19th century, but the territory would have been divided among dozens of nations and small states. By the 20th century, several regional states could have formed here: the Great Lakes Confederation in the east, the Plains Union in the center, and the Pacific League in the west. They would have been less industrially developed than Mexico or the Andes, but would have had vast territories and rich natural resources. Now let's move to 2025. What would this world look like? The global economy would have been completely different. Without gold and silver from the Americas, European capitalism would have developed more slowly. Spain would not have become a superpower of the 16th century, and England would not have had the money for the Industrial Revolution. Perhaps industrialization would have begun in China or India. The global center of economic gravity would have remained in Asia, as it was for most of history. There would be no United States of America, the superpower of the 20th to 21st centuries. Without the US, the First World War might have ended without a winner. The Second World War, without American industry, would have lasted longer or ended differently. There would have been no Cold War. In practice, this would mean no Hollywood, no US music industry, no Coca-Cola or McDonald's. There is no single dominant language. In different regions, several working languages function. In the Americas, Spanish/Portuguese, alongside Nahuatl and Quechua. In East Asia, Chinese. In Europe and Africa, English and French for trade and diplomacy. Instead, Mexican pop culture would compete with European and Asian. Films in Nahuatl and Quechua would be released worldwide. Cuisine would also be different. Less US fast food, more traditional Mexican and Andean food. In 2025, morning in Tenochtitlan begins like in any modern megacity. People wake up, check their smartphones, and ride the metro to work. But everything looks different. The station names are written in Nahuatl, the official language of the Mexican Empire. In the cars, there are advertisements for local companies. Tlaloc Tech, which works with artificial intelligence. Questel Mobile, the largest smartphone manufacturer in Latin America. On the streets, skyscrapers stand next to ancient pyramids, which are now museums. The Mexican Empire in 2025 is an industrial state with 200 million people and an economy in fourth place in the world after China, a united Europe, and India. The capital, Tenochtitlan, is a megacity with 35 million inhabitants. Here are the headquarters of large corporations and world-class universities. It was here that a new technology for storing solar energy was invented. A typical resident wakes up in an apartment on the 40th floor with a view of Lake Texcoco. The lake was restored in the 20th century as an ecological park. People go to work on electric buses or bicycles. At work, they open a computer with the Tenno OS operating system, the Mexican alternative to Windows. The search engine is called Tonatia Search. The social network instead of Facebook is the Tlocan platform with 600 million users. Instead of YouTube, YouTube, there is the Xochitl video platform. The most popular blogger on the planet is a Mexican named Cuauhtemoc with 200 million subscribers. In the evening, they turn on the TV. In the news, the Mexican Empire has launched a new mission to Mars together with China and Europe. Mexico's space agency is one of the top 3 in the world. Then the sports news. The national team in Ulimalazitli is preparing for the World Championship. Ulimalazitli, the traditional Aztec ball game, became a global sport in the 20th century with professional leagues in 50 countries. The Andean Empire, centered in Cusco, would have had 150 to 180 million people, controlling the territory from Colombia to Argentina along the Pacific Ocean. The economy would be based on the extraction of copper, lithium, and oil, as well as agriculture. Cusco would be a city of 15 to 20 million inhabitants, where ancient Inca walls stand next to modern buildings. Quechua would be the official language with tens of millions of speakers. Global warming in 2025 is a less serious problem. Without the huge energy consumption in the US, which in reality produces 15% of global CO2 emissions, the planet is slightly cooler. This does not solve the problem, but it gives more time to switch to renewable energy. Education is different as well. The Mexican model of education, which combines Western science with traditional knowledge, has become popular. Students study not only physics and mathematics, but also traditional astronomy, medicine, and agriculture of their cultures. In 2025, a tourist could visit Tenochtitlan and see ancient pyramids in the center of a modern megacity, where people speak Nahuatl, wear modern clothes with traditional ornaments, and eat tacos in world-class restaurants. Or fly to Cusco, walk through narrow streets, see mountain terraces, and visit a museum with historical records on knotted cords. Or travel across the plains of North America, where millions of bisons still migrate and nomadic peoples live in modern yurts with solar panels and the internet. The life of an ordinary person in 2025 in this alternative world is slightly different, but not radically so. People still wake up, go to work, watch series, communicate on social networks, and travel, but the company names, brands, and apps are different. Instead of iPhone, Questel phone. Instead of Netflix, Xochitl streaming. Instead of Tesla, the Mexican electric cars, Tonatiuh Motors. The world is less centralized, less Americanized, and more culturally diverse. It would not be a paradise. These states would have their own problems, inequality, corruption, environmental challenges, and conflicts, but would be a different world. A world where the indigenous peoples of the Americas did not lose 90% of their population, were not pushed onto marginal lands, and did not lose their languages and cultures. A world where history was written not only by the victors from Europe, but also by those who had lived here for millennia. And this reminds us, history could have gone differently. The world we know was not inevitable. It is the result of chance, decisions, and catastrophes. Understanding this helps us see our world not as the only possible one, but as one of many alternatives.